So the next session is just kind of some next steps. It's mostly funding slides. So I'll probably rip through it. And because a lot of it are programs that I'm not very familiar with, because we're also looking to extend, I think, some of these technological expertises to other directorates within NSF where that might be the more appropriate home for it. And it is a way to kind of expand past maybe some of the Arctic and Antarctic funding that people are a little bit more used to. But first, thanks, everybody. I think it's been a really productive couple days. Thanks for being patient with all of us. We definitely hope to continue it in the future, and we are going to be really looking for your feedback on what you guys want to see in the years to come. So one of my jobs now is to maybe reach out to IARPIC and form one of these self-forming teams and invite you all to join. And so you guys can, again, make your own accounts for it. You can also check out some of these other groups if you have overlapping interest in those spaces. A lot of them are pretty active, and I think can be really good resources for people looking to explore more of what's out there in the Arctic space. And then this isn't just NSF. I think maybe that's something that a lot of people have been hearing a lot today is about NSF, because I think we were pulling from an NSF pool when we were organizing all this, but this is something that is truly interagency. And a lot of the other agencies do engage in this on a really productive level. And then moving forward, we'll also be uploading, I think, all these posters and the talks. And so you guys will be able to look back and share some of the presentations that you've seen here today. We don't have a firm timeline on that, so maybe over the next couple months or two, keep checking it. We'll send out an email maybe when everything is up there and you guys can check it out. Okay, now funding. So I think one of the criticisms, and I think it came from Pat Smith, about maybe why the Polar Technology Conference wasn't as sustainable in years past, is that we'd bring you all together, you guys would make all these connections and get really excited about it, but then not really have anywhere to go with all these new ideas that you had generated. And one thing I think I can say about OPP itself is that it is kind of mostly focused on natural sciences. We do have space for kind of some of the more technology development, but it can be kind of slow. And so I think with my goal with this was to kind of reach out to some of the directorates at NSF that may just have a really different process than we have, and just to make you guys aware of them, because maybe the solution for your project doesn't really live within OPP. It could be living in other directorates. And then usually how that happens is you can submit to another directorate, and that directorate will be like, oh, this seems really Arctic. I'm going to go talk to those Arctic guys, and then usually we'll co-review it and maybe co-fund it. We're going to rip through a bunch of funding stuff real fast. So just to remind you guys about the Arctic Natural Sciences section, these are the 4 different science programs. There is space for, I think, technology development within all of these inside a proposal, but we don't really have a technology-driven program or solicitation specifically for that. I think RSL used to do some of that, but then kind of sunset it. I'm not sure why, if we're going to be honest. But any I think money that you'd be looking for in this space would kind of be within the proposal that would go to one of these systems. And then with Summit Station, we also have relationships where you can test out technology in that space on a cost reimbursable basis. And we've done that with NASA a bunch. Either things that you're looking to send to Antarctica could be a cheaper option just to come to Summit first and test stuff out there. Even for space, we've had people come to us at Summit Station being like, hey, we're going to eventually send this to Mars. Maybe we're going to test it in Antarctica next, but we just want to get some initial data on how it works in a remote environment. We also have the Navigating the New Arctic solicitation, or it's a big idea. The solicitation just passed for FY20, but these projects are really looking at the space between social systems, the built environment, and the natural environment. Although we have funded stuff that is more, instead of the built environment, we're like hardcore engineering. I think we had in the DCL that came out in 2018, had somebody that got some initial funding to look at working with engineering to do some underwater robotics or adding some technology to AUVs that would go under the ice. So So this is it's just finished its second year. There's 3 more years, theoretically, of funding for it as a big idea. But we're also understanding that we are creating this whole new science community that we're actually hoping to train to think in a convergent way, and that those scientists will need somewhere to go for funding when that sunsets. So don't think about this as something that will end just in 5 years. I think the goal is really to create a new generation of scientists that will be able to tackle all the changes that have been happening in the Arctic for years to come. And then other opportunities that I think Arctic really interfaces with well is the EarthCube Research Grant and research coordination networks. And a research coordination network is just money that you guys can get to meet with each other and coordinate ideas. We understand that generating these ideas does take time. It does take a lot of money, and it takes meeting in person usually to find this common language. And I think those have a funding limit and a time limit, but just to make sure that you guys are aware of them. Cyber infrastructure for sustained scientific innovation. I don't know much about that one, but it does exist. Undergraduate STEM education. There's also a Dear Colleague letter supporting engaging students in the public in polar research, and that's headed up by Lisa Rahm, who is, both those are headed up by Lisa Rahm. So contact her if you guys have really specific educational opportunities that you're interested in. And then understanding the rules of life. That's another big idea for the foundation, and maybe that's less appropriate to this crowd, but it was just on the slide. And understanding the rules of life is taking genotype to phenotype. So exploring kind of on a cellular level how the genotypes of a living organism results in the expression of something as a phenotype. This is Mike Jackson's program, Instrumentation and Research Facilities. He could probably say a lot more about this than I could, so we'll just let you guys know that exists and to contact him if you have questions about it. And then also for our UK friends in the room, NSF also has an agreement with NERC, which is the UK funding agency. It is for only specific directorates, and I know BioDEB definitely has it, which is, and then all of GEO has it as well. And that's how the Thwaites expedition kind of was funded under that umbrella, which I think a lot of folks are familiar with. And the way it works is that you have to have a letter of intent, so you have to contact the program officer and say, hey, we want to do this. And then it can either get submitted to NERC or it can be submitted to NSF, depending on who the lead scientist is. And that proposal then gets evaluated through whoever it was submitted to, whether it's submitted to NERC or if it was submitted to NSF. And then there's an agreement between the two agencies where if that is successful, then then both sides will fund it. And we have some successful NERC awards in the Arctic section as well. I think the latest iteration of Ice Caps up at Summit is an NSF NERC award with Ryan Neely. We also have the Major Research Instrumentation Program, so that is for a pot of money that I think competes across the entire foundation. Again, I know less about this one. I think there's a lot of rules, but it could also be a lot of money, is my understanding of it. But you guys should check that out if you want to buy kind of a large piece of instrumentation for your facility or for your university. I think you have to demonstrate how it can have the largest impact for your university or institution as a whole, but you can, get some access to some money that is just specifically for research instrumentation. You don't have to build like a whole science proposal around it. So now we're kind of moving on to SIZE, which is the computing director at NSF. And I got these from Kevin Thompson, so he's the one that you should talk to if you have questions about this program. So CSSI is Cyber Infrastructure for Sustained Scientific Innovation. Supports the development and deployment of robust, reliable, and sustainable data and software cyber infrastructure. Innovative capabilities towards sustained scientific innovation and discovery. Advanced common approaches to sustain and innovate research cyber infrastructures. Follows accepted data management and software development practices. Not the person to talk to about this. Call Kevin. But I think there's a lot of space for these computing efforts in the polar realm, as we've been talking about big data, as we've been talking about how to look at things on a pan-Arctic or a all Antarctic scale, I think we're understanding that people want more and more systematic understanding of these efforts on both poles. And so I think partnerships with the computing directorate moving forward is a really great opportunity for this group here. And then there's also a cyber training, so training-based workforce development for advanced cyber infrastructure that Kevin also sent me a slide on. So twin goals for research workforce preparation, so broad adoption of CI tools and methods, or curriculum and instructional materials development and integration. Three project classes, so pilot, exploratory activities, which has a funding cap of $300,000 for 2 years. Implementation, broadly accessible to community, small and medium. The small is $500K for 4 years, medium is $1 million for 4 years. Large-scale project conceptualization, planning grants for potential future institute-like cyber training projects, so $500K for 2 years. And this is to address 3 communities of concern, so trying to generate more CI professionals, CI contributors, and CI users. And maybe that's something we've kind of been running into in the polar sphere as well, is like we really do want to kind of train this next generation of scientists that can be literate in all these things, because I think as you guys have seen over the last few days, it's a very interdisciplinary space, right? If you want to work in Antarctica, you have to be able to talk to satellites, you have to get there, you have to have technology that'll function in that space. And I think we're starting to appreciate that we have to make the polar community kind of more literate in these other disciplines that are also just advancing really rapidly. So here's an opportunity for an education-based solicitation. And then this is another program from the computing division, and it's CISE, SISE, Computer Information Science and Engineering. And so this is from Dr. David Corman. I have a slide at the end with some people to talk to if you're interested in this opportunity. And it's developing smart and connected communities, technology, and social science working together for a better society. So another very interdisciplinary opportunity. There's a video, so maybe I'll pull a Jeff Osborne for Kepler and give this a couple seconds if people want to take a picture of it. You want to watch that later? You don't have to write it down. I haven't watched it, so I can't tell you what it says. So successful, smart, and connected communities research. So research that integrates and advances social, behavioral, and economic sciences, policy and implementation, and technical disciplines, connecting with research questions inspired by community needs, an interactive cycle of conducting research, and piloting and evaluating solutions in the community. So near and long-term scientific and community impact, enabling university-community partnerships, civic engagement, and education of workforce development to facilitate long-term benefits of innovation. So those are the goals of that program. So improve quality of life within communities, not just smart cities. They have some key research questions that address community needs and achieve impact. And again, this is another multi-directorate opportunity and also multi-agency. And then I think they have a relationship with the Japan Science and Technology Group as well. So maybe you guys can just take a look at some of the issues that they're used to dealing with. But I think a case can be made for, I think when we think of these programs, we think of lower 48 type of problems. But I think there's definitely a case to be made for this in the Arctic. And then if you're really innovative, I think there's a case to be made for the Antarctic as well if you're studying things like transportation or just how a small community of people kind of manage all their problems. So specific elements for understanding, so critical Hallmeyer questions for that would kind of define this program. What is the problem? Why is it hard? What are the limits of current practice? What's your new approach? Who cares? What impact will success have? What are the risks and the payoffs? How much will it cost? How long will it take? And how will success be measured? So I think those are the question framework if you're kind of interested in this solicitation to think through. We had a couple examples. I'll let you guys read those for a second. I won't read at you. So the solicitation is explicitly open to universities and industry, which is different, I think, than a lot of the other solicitations at NSF. So, which maybe could appeal to, which is why we thought this solicitation would appeal to some other folks in the room. So many teams include collaborations spanning academia, industry, and community. We also recognize the value of international collaborations, where that kind of explains that relationship with the Japanese Science and Technology Agency. So I think this is a solicitation where there is kind of that agreement where NSF will fund a U.S. portion of it, and then the other agency will fund the international side. And I think maybe you guys are sensing that is something that can be done at NSF, is like giving money to international institutions, but it's really hard, and you have to justify it in a way that's very specific. And you should talk to a program officer that you're intending to submit to if that's something that you want to do, because there's a lot of rules on it, because it is taxpayer money. And so the justification to take taxpayer money to a different country has to be really, really strongly qualified. And here's just some examples of where past solicitations have made their awards. So I think probably the last one was 52 awards, $42 million. You can kind of see where some of the more successful awards went. I'm not sure if that pie is dollars or award numbers. If I had to guess, it's probably dollars. So if it's in dollars, that's not meant to say that the number of awards in that space is reflective of the pie. So you can have just, one or two awards that are really expensive in water management. But maybe that's something I can ask for clarification on later for you guys too. Coming events, Civic Innovation Challenge comparison with SCC programs. So this is the SCC solicitation. I actually should have probably removed this one because I don't have a lot of context for it. But you can ask the Cognizant program officer about it if you want to learn more. And then I had one example of an SNCC project. So resilient water systems, integrating environmental sensor networks and real-time forecasting to adaptively manage drinking water quality and build social trust. So you can see where they kind of outline the project in those questions that I mentioned earlier. And this is just an example of something that was successful with this program. And here are the program directors. So David Corman was the one that had sent these slides. So he knows that the solicitation is being kind of advertised in this space. So he's probably the one that you can reach out to if you have more questions. So reach out if you're interested. Again, we're kind of going back to some of the tenets of the program. Program is having important societal impact, research areas are appropriate, why it might be difficult, and why it might not be as difficult as you think. Okay, now we're moving on to another section at NSF. These guys are in the engineering department. And again, I think this may be more appealing to folks that are kind of in the industry space or looking to partner with industry. So it's the Industrial Innovation and Partnership, IIP is what we call it. And this is almost our answer to venture capital funding from a government side of things. So these guys are great. They're so slick. I think when you're used to working in a federal agency, we're like, man, can we get some money for like graphic design or something? Like that's something I feel like I'm challenged all the time at NSF is how to really connect with in a community that is effective and appealing. We just don't have the staff that I think NASA does a really good job on it, and that's because they've dumped a ton of money into having a whole department that is kind of their media machine. But these guys have done it on a much smaller scale, and I've just been starting to interact with them more and more. So I'm not super familiar with their program. I think Pat might have a better insight on to some of the stuff that they do. But every time I've come to them or seen their stuff, they're just really great, and they are super responsive, and they're meant to be seen by a lot of people. So they have a program that's kind of really easy to access and to understand, and their website's awesome. But I just kind of wanted to put it on people's radar. So the IIP program is kind of like the director, and then within that they have these 5 separate programs that they run. So they want to accelerate NSF-funded and federally funded fundamental research into market opportunities and foster public-private partnerships to advance technological innovation. So they have America's Seed Fund, the SBIR, STTR. So it's up to $1.75 million in R&D funding to develop transformative, deep tech, high-impact technologies. They have this website, the seedfund.nsf.gov/apply, and that's kind of how you set up a pitch. And they fund, man, they kind of fund everything. I was trying to get a sense of like what they were, if they had any specific, but anything that you would want kind of, they just like technology. I think I sat in one of their distributed ledgers talk the other day, and it's everything from like blockchain to, I don't know, it's like stuff I've never even heard about. So, but they're really responsive, and that's something that I sat through one of her webinars, and that's what she just kept saying. She's like, just call us. Here's all our stuff, but call us, reach out to us. We'll tell you where to go. So they really want to make it easy for you to access them and to access their money and to get started on developing any ideas that you might have that they would be interested in. And she even said, she's like, hey, we get off this webinar, you guys can form a company like in days after this webinar, and you can then come to me and we'll get your pitch together. So there's a phase 1, which is feasibility, phase 2, prototype development, phase II-B, third-party investment. And those are the kind of the funding outlines, the monetary outlines for them. And the other program they have is the Innovation Corps. So it spurs translation of fundamental research to the marketplace, trains NSF-funded faculty, students, and other researchers in innovation and entrepreneurship skills, and gain valuable insight into starting a business or industry requirements and challenges. Works with universities nationwide to foster a national innovation network. So I-Corps, team awards, 7 weeks, 100 plus interviews, $50,000, nearly 800 startups created. So that's another option they have. Partnerships for Innovation, or PFI, is a different program. So it's next steps in advancing toward marketplace. Prototyping awards for researchers with history of NSF awards. Does not require employment at a small business. Open to any technology that is covered by NSF. And then it's also coupled to the I-Corps, which is what I just talked about. They also have this program, which is the Industry University Cooperative Research Centers. So they catalyze pre-competitive research through sustained engagement between industry, academics, and government agencies. 804 unique members, 70 plus centers nationwide, 203 research sites, 37 states, 1,600 center-trained students hired by members. And then they have an intern program. So up to $55K for up to 6 months of internship. Host organizations may include industry labs, startups, government agencies, national labs, policy think tanks, nonprofits, funds for faculty, co-mentoring. And this is a space where international students can participate. And then the IP is under NSF trainee policies. So it gives grad students access to real-world immersion. Industries can mentor and access a new generation of talent. NSF catalyzed workforce development, which is, I think, something that NSF has really been charged with in the last couple of years. And as we understand that most people getting their PhDs don't go to academia anymore, it's really challenging. So that is something NSF has been taking on, is trying to figure out ways to give students the skills they need to succeed in industry. And then for universities, it builds a pathway to a new, stronger links with industry. And that's something, again, NSF is trying to increase, is this public-private partnership. And then some examples that we've talked about in this forum that have had successful awards through this group is the Swarm. Satellites, here's all of the awards that they got for their work and what led them to help them to start up their company. And then recently we had Pole Arctic LLC, which I'm not familiar with. We just saw them kind of come through on, I think, an IARPIC board, saying that they had also been successful in this space, and they're looking at bathymetry and coastal erosion. I think just in the Arctic. There's a robotics program at NSF. I don't know anything about it, but I know the lady that's in charge of it. So you can call me, and then I'll put her in touch with you. But NSF has several funding opportunities for fundamental research on robotics and related areas. There's kind of 2 iterations of it. The foundational research in robotics. The robotics program supports foundational research in robotics. All proposals must convincingly explain how a successful outcome will enable transformative new robot functionality, sustainably enhance existing robot functionality. And then you have the National Robotics Initiative. And that program supports fundamental research that will accelerate the development and use of collaborative robots. I don't know what collaborative robots mean, but I'm guessing it's an industry term. Oh, there you go. So it works with humans and interacting with them. And then again, this is kind of like the space where like there is a whole language to other directorates that I feel like that's a good example of us learn something. So that's the NSF opportunities that I kind of ran through. There's more, I'm sure, but maybe we can stop for a second. And if people have questions, I got a bunch of NASA slides from the NASA program managers that we can run through next. Are there any NSF questions? I think when it comes down to it, if you guys are like looking for something to like I have this idea, you can probably contact me and I'll try to chase down an answer for you.
So most grantees are affiliated with an institution of some sort. Are there opportunities for people that are not formally affiliated?
Well, I think all of the ones that I just went through, the size stuff and the all of the engineering ones, those are open to industry as well. I'm sure there's some rules associated with it. And then NSF isn't just academic universities, it's open to nonprofits. So if you look in, I think there's something called the PAPPG, which is the rules for submitting an NSF proposal. There is some very concrete language about who is eligible. And then that language, it does include, I think, more than you usually assume. And then there's some very specific solicitations, like the engineering program that I just went through, and then that second computational solicitation that also meant for, the computational solicitation was meant kind of for industry, academia, government partnership, but then the engineering one is, you don't have to, I think that's kind of meant for starting small businesses. Sorry, I just remembered something. NSF also has something called EAGRs, and so that is meant for kind of things that are so on the edge that you're afraid that it won't make it through a panel review process. I think, and it's kind of tough, like I've met different program officers who kind of have different definitions of what they consider an EAGR to be, and I think the NSF as a foundation is trying to better crack down on that and give some more definition, because I think they're afraid that people utilize EAGRs and Rapids as ways to access money without full merit review, because that is how it works. You kind of contact a program officer, and Rapids are awards that you can get in response to an event that you need quickly. So the coronavirus is an example. I think a DCL came out related to the coronavirus, where we understand that PIs, in order to respond to and conduct research on something that's happening right now, there is this mechanism to get money, kind of a small amount of money quickly to respond to like a natural event. But the EAGRs, sometimes program officers like to see that go through a panel review process, and then actually make sure it doesn't do well in panel review before they're like, okay, well, I'll take this portion of it and we'll make it into an EAGR. But then there's also some POs that are like, well, yeah, I don't want you to waste the time writing a full proposal when you're probably going to really get dinged on this because you haven't proved it. Here's a certain amount of money that you can have, show us that it works, and then you have some pilot data that you can write a full proposal on. So those are two other mechanisms, and those go all across the foundation that people can utilize. And then there's also something called a research coordination network, where you can, again, get I think I mentioned it earlier, but I'll just reiterate it now. You can get money just to get people together to formulate an idea on something that needs a lot of community input on, or something that you're kind of building up to. I'm trying to think of an example. I can't right now. But you should, if you want more information, you can write me or any of the Arctic POs, and they'll give you some concrete examples and some topics that, and then give you more feedback on whether or not it would be appropriate. Okay, questions, or we'll move on to NASA.
Since you asked, collaborative robots, it's if you have a conventional industrial type robot, it's too strong to be able to work with it safely. You have to have it in a cage and shut it down so when somebody works near it. Whereas a collaborative robot, in principle, is one that you can work next to, and if it hits you, it's either not going to hit you in the face or it's not going to hurt you if it does. There's a couple of companies come out of MIT that do it well. That wasn't what I was going to say. What I was just going to say is, from a British perspective, the political unpleasantness from 2016 that is Brexit means that we are, as a country, trying to make connections with other countries that are not the European Union. And so, given that most people here are from not the European Union, you might want to look at some of the things that's going on in UKRI. UKRI.org is the British funding agency, because they are trying to build collaborations for British researchers with people who are not in Europe. So just to make people aware of that. Thank you.
Okay. So I got these slides from a NASA program manager chat that was kind of hosted by IRPIC Collaborations. It was done by Mike Falkowski, Thorsten Marcus, and Colleen Hafke. Peter Griffith was also on the call and had a lot of input kind of in those discussions as well. So I think I'll just blow through it. They actually recorded that webinar, and I'll give you guys the webinar information at the end of it, so you can just go and watch them talk, because they know a lot more than I do about their program. But I think the moral of the story is that NASA funds polar research in these 4 programs that they have: the research and analysis, the flight, the applied science, and the technology programs. Here's just kind of a graphic of all of their Earth fleet. So operating in future through 2023, you can see the codes kind of in the bottom right there. So they outline ones that are in pre-formulation, ones that are in implementation, ones that are in primary ops, and then ones that are in extended ops. And then kind of the one that's been the poster child for the polar regions is the ISAT-2. And then actually Tom Newman gave a really, really great overview of the ISAT-2 capabilities at the Parker meeting that happened at Goddard. Oh, was that 2 weeks ago? Was it just 2 weeks ago? It feels like we all lived a life just 2 weeks ago. But that was actually recorded. And I think it'd be really great for people who are interested in that data to go take a look at it, because I think the way he described it is we under-promised, but they had hopes of over-delivering, and that's exactly what they're finding out. I think the ISAT-2 has a lot of capabilities just beyond the measurements for the laser altimeter devoted to the ice. There's a ton of terrestrial applications right now. They're even talking about bathymetric mapping in coastal waters that have like low turbidity. And so you guys, maybe that's something I can do too, is I'll try to find the link to that talk, and you guys should really check it out in terms of like what data is going to be accessible through ISAT-2 in the coming years. So this is a cryospheric science program. It's Thorsten Marcus just came on this last year, and then Colleen Hafke has been around for the last couple of years. It was originally or previously supported by Tom Wagner, who moved on to a planetary science position within NASA. So it supports investigations of polar ice, including the Antarctic and Greenland. It's a bipolar program. Polar glaciers and sea ice in the Arctic and Southern Ocean, based on satellite and airborne remote sensing. And I think that's what you need to take away from that, satellite and airborne remote sensing. They seek to improve understanding of cryospheric processes, link cryosphere to the global climate system, and advance predictive capabilities. And then from Mike Falkowski was on that line from the terrestrial ecology program. They're focused on improving our understanding of the structure and function of global terrestrial ecosystems. Solicitations come out via the NASA Research Opportunities in Earth and Space Sciences, or ROSES, which comes out on February 4th. And I thought that was pretty funny. For Valentine's Day, called it ROSES. Solicitation topics vary, but generally align with program descriptions and keywords above. History of supporting large multi-year field campaigns, so Boreas, LBA, and above, which is, I think a lot of people are probably familiar with right now. Then they had a slide about above. I think Nancy could probably talk to you about above if you guys have questions, but that's something that came out of their program. They also have some student programs. Finest. Purpose is to provide relevant research and or technological development project training to disciplines needed to achieve goals of NASA Science Mission Directorate. It's $45K a year. Are for student-designed research projects that contribute to NASA's SMD science, technology, and exploration goals. Finance is a grant program for PI-led research teams, not a fellowship program that students apply to. I think that's an important distinction for them. They also have the early career programs. NIP, New Investigators Program, supports outstanding scientific research and career development of scientists and engineers in the early stages of their professional career. Average award side is $80 to $90K a year. Single PI is the only essential member of a NIP proposal. Collaboration encouraged. So no institutional or science PI, no co-Is. And so for more info, that's where you go. And then if you just want to listen to them go through it with a lot more information than what I just gave you, that NASA Program Manager chat was recorded and is available on the IARPIC Collaborations webinar page. It's pretty Arctic focused, but because it was for IARPIC, but I think people are open to questions about bipolar stuff too. Oh, and then I have some just stray ones that I've kind of heard about just kind of on the peripheries, and I'm sure more people would have a better understanding of them than I would, but there is kind of more and more funding kind of cropping up, it seems like, in the nonprofit space, where people are starting to feel the urgency of climate change and then are wanting to devote resources to it. And we've seen some really interesting things kind of being funded in that space. I think NSF wants to be high risk, high reward, but I think sometimes people are afraid to submit those types of proposals for us because it just takes so much time to put together an NSF proposal. And I think we fully appreciate that. So I've been seeing some kind of really interesting stuff come out of these other institutions. And we kind of asked, well, why didn't you come to us with that? And they're like, I didn't think it would make it. And I was like, oh, that's fair. But this is something I got in my email. I don't know anything about it, but I think we do have contacts at Smith Ocean that I could probably put you in touch with if you had more questions. And then Phil, you seem to know some stuff that was coming out of Smith related to the technology stuff. But while Phil gets a microphone, so we got this email about high performance computing competition on the Schmidt Ocean platform. They're welcoming proposals to utilize high-performance computing cluster. They have a link to it. I think, yeah. So here are the specs of their high-performance computer. They didn't have a lot of information, so it seems like a program that you'd want to probably call and talk to somebody about. They don't have like the how-tos on their website that I was kind of digging through, but I didn't look too hard. But Phil, maybe you can give some more insight.
So I have co-authored a paper in 2016. We put the first high-performance computer in the world on the Falcor in January of 2015. And what we immediately found was that none of the oceanographers had a clue how to use it. And they also found that each university had their own software, which was not compatible with the high-performance computers. So we had to do about 6 months of training. And in the paper, we reviewed 4 different case uses for the high-performance computer at sea. Biological, geological, physical oceanography, and something else, I think events, and showed what you got from having a high-performance computer on a ship that you couldn't possibly have gotten otherwise, one of which things includes real-time feedback from massive data sets that lets you change your plan in real time. And the other is the Schmidt Marine Science and Technology Policy Program that is open at any time of the year. You can just send a proposal in. And with regard to why investigators might consider it a little easier than NSF, it's because Schmidt routinely funds international teams fairly quickly. And that's one of the distinctions. If you have an international team with 6 or 4 countries, it is a little bit easier to go through Schmidt and faster that way. So, yeah, they have money and they're handing it out. And they routinely they also fund planning meetings. So if you need to have a meeting with a bunch of people to bring them together internationally, they'll help fund you to bring those people together and figure out how to collaborate on a proposal to put into them.
Sorry. Yeah, that's a really good point. It does seem like these kind of, nonprofit are kind of stepping in to kind of also do the types of things that just NSF can't or has a hard time doing, just because we are working with taxpayer dollars. And that's a lot of, for a good reason, there's a lot of accountability and time that goes into making sure that all of that is managed correctly. Paul Allen has a family foundation that also has a climate and energy program, and Craig Lee from University of Washington, who's a pretty prominent polar oceanographer, had something funded by them pretty recently. And again, I think it was gliders going underneath the ice. I don't know much about it. They also have a company called Vulcan that is doing some really interesting things in the satellite space. But again, maybe something to look at because they're interested in polar opportunities as well. And then I found these guys, I forget how, but it's Heising Simons Foundation. And this is all just letting you know it's there. There's a lot about this that I don't know. So I have no idea what it's like to work with the Paul Smith Foundation and the Heising Simons. But they also have a climate and clean energy and then a science program that we've kind of seen. PIs that come to us have kind of other projects funded through these institutions, and just to make people aware of them. Okay, that's all I had. Sorry, that was the gamut.
Some people may already be aware of this, but I think it's fairly new. Mark Benioff has an Ocean Science Foundation, and he just put $100 million a year into the pot, and he has to spend $30 million a year to keep it going. That's quite a bit of money. And I have been advising on one of the programs that he's been funding, the Ocean Cleanup Program, for a number of years per request of them, because they're doing things in the ocean that the Coast Guard has to make sure are safe. But $30 million a year for ocean sciences is a lot of money. And so the Benioff Ocean Foundation, I think, is new. And I think new is always a good opportunity to get in there. And if they can't spell high latitude, it's time for us to talk to them about that.
There's a number of other federal entities that I just don't have a lot of exposure or familiarity with that are also, like Department of Energy has been showing more and more interest in the Arctic, BOEM. I've run into friends that are doing projects up in Prudhoe Bay. So if you guys have questions, you can always email me, and it's a small federal world, and I'm sure I could find the right person for you guys to talk to that has the time. Sometimes that's part of it is the personality that's willing to take the call and wanting to talk, and then also people just having time. So I know that's a lot of information, maybe not for the right audience, but we just wanted to give people a pathway forward, or for somewhere to take ideas that might have generated out of this conference together. And so maybe we'll kind of move into wrapping it up. We didn't really have anything structured for this time. Like we said before, I'm going to be moving forward with a collaboration space, and kind of hoping to start continuing the conversation through webinars and emails. I think what I would like to do, next is maybe have the speakers that couldn't make it give webinars, and then that way we can still see some of their talks, because there was all of them I was really excited about, and I think it would definitely, I think they were too, so I think they would definitely like to have the audience. Does any of the steering committee want to say something kind of as we're...
Kate, is it worth bringing through the contributions that are on the wall from next door and bringing that to the main group? Yeah, thanks.
Sweet. Yeah, and thanks to everybody for engaging in this. I think when we try different media stuff like this, we're never sure how people will respond. So we really appreciate that people gave us or were willing to play along, basically. So I think we had, maybe we can go to the polar challenge. I think one person had a polar challenge, which was test facility for blowing snow and spindrift and associated standard for spindrift tests. And I think it looks like some people had some answers. NASA in New York and Iowa State both have such, also Krell And Curl has a wind tunnel for snow drift studies. Might be similar setup. Cold room chambers for the many sizes, snowmaking capabilities. Great. So it sounds like somebody got their question answered, which is awesome. And I think everything else was related to kind of the future of the PTC. So maybe this is the first one. I'm glad we didn't scar you with coronavirus because only one person thought that this should be all virtual. And then everyone else seemed to have a pretty overwhelming support for either in person or both. And I think, yeah, I definitely agree, but that's something we can take moving forward. We had some people who were really interested in animal tracking and monitoring as a future topic. And then I think we actually have some contacts that the person can look to kind of continue those collaborations. And that is, I think, a really interesting use case because it does kind of merge a lot of technology to kind of solve one problem as a difficult problem. Cats. Oh, acoustics. Yeah. So that's more animal tracking stuff. So breakout session and coffee race, very useful for networking. Oh, I'm glad people. I know this is something I'm really impressed with you guys as attendees. You guys are very willing to talk to each other, which is great. I think that is something we always worry about. Is like, oh, we're going to bring everyone together. Is it going to be productive time? And it really seems like everyone was willing to have these conversations, and I definitely appreciate it. Should this be a working group under a bigger polar organization? That's true. Does anybody have a suggestion on what that... Oh, here we go.
Well, one suggestion anyway, it would be interesting to engage with COMNAP as the International Antarctic Organization. They actually have a seminar, symposium they call it, sorry, which happens every other meeting, which is called the Symposium on Antarctic Logistics, that covers kind of non-science stuff. And so you could potentially co-locate PTC with COMNAP and with Arctic Council maybe as well.
That's a really good thought. And does anyone can think of any other larger polar organizations that might be a better home for this kind of consortium rather than the Arctic Collaborations, the IARPIC Collaborations Portal? Let's keep it technology focused. Let's get the military here as well. I agree with that. I think that's important. And we do have some military here. We'll get more military. Yeah, because I feel like they have a lot of probably solutions that probably aren't on the academic radar.
Sort of going back to this discussion about whether or not there needs to be more graduate students here. And I've noticed over the 3 PTCs that I've been to, we've gotten further and further away from technology, and this one seemed to be more academic than previous options. And I think having a lot of master sergeants and tech sergeants here that are dealing with some of these polar environment issues, they're more of the grounds-on, hands-on people in the engineering level and field science level rather than the academic level. And that's what I enjoy from this conference, because every other conference I go to, I don't go to a lot, but they're heavily academic, heavily graduate student oriented. So I like having more of the hands-on screwdrivers, hands-on wire strippers kind of people here. And the other thing about that is in previous conferences, both Pascal and Iris and UNAVCO, and then lots of vendors and lots of scientists and engineers have had equipment at the conference. And I really found that was beneficial because we could all look at each other's designs and solutions and help troubleshoot in a real-time collaborative rather than sending it out into the ether and hoping somebody responds. You can kind of pin people down here, or they'll more likely volunteer where your screw-ups are, and I thought that was helpful.
Noted. Yeah, I think that I was getting a lot of feedback from folks who kind of wishing there was more stuff on site in terms of things you can actually touch and interact with and get a sense for the engineering for, rather than having it be kind of on a poster or described in a talk. So I think that's something that's been felt by a couple people. I think in the academic space, I think as long as NSF is going to be kind of a major supporter and contributor financially to the conference, that is something that will probably stay, and that is that strong academic presence, just because that's our funding model. That's what NSF does, is basic research. We are congressionally mandated to operate the 3 stations at the Antarctic sites, but NSF as a whole, a $6 billion agency, that's honestly just a small part of what NSF does. So I feel that comment, but I think that maybe there could be space for both. And maybe we can consider kind of, either breakout sessions or not having it be full plenary, so that there's room for kind of more targeted interests in the conference rather than having us kind of forced to be all in one room.
And we had a comment online as well from Bill Manley. Some folks would appreciate participating in the Arctic Observing Systems subteam.
So just following up on your comment, so for academic presentations, I think I would personally find it a bit more useful if there were some guidelines given to the academic presenters to take the essence of their research, but then pull out more what the technological dimensions or issues are, because the main focus of this is technology rather than just a general science briefing like you'd be in one of your domains. So I understand the strong connection with the research, but if they could somehow get it more focused and pull that into the technology realm, either in here's my problems, or I've run across some things that would be useful to share, or something to that effect.
First off, thanks you for organizing this. It was actually really well ran and everything, and everyone seemed to have talked what they wanted to. Say what they wanted to say. Anyway, technology, yeah, definitely IT. I think IT was very represented. The only mention was probably was the high performance computing. And when you had the specs out there, it's like those are the same specs that we at Scripps have bought for all our vessels, but it's for a different purpose. It's more for redundancy, VM cluster, for resiliency. We want zero downtime. It's like $2,000 an hour waste if you have any sort of downtime. So from switches, from like modems or something, if some of those companies, IT companies, Dell, whatever. I don't know if you could get Dell out here to come out, showcase their wares, because all this data needs to go somewhere. It needs to be stored somewhere. It needs to be displayed somewhere. So that's technology, right? Infrastructure. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for that feedback. Maybe we can go back to some of the other comments. Like starting the meeting with stakeholders, stating their issues. And then I think maybe this is more along the lines of what Pat was talking about. So Merritt's talk, compiling the issues and needs from her many colleagues, was a great plenary. And maybe if we have kind of continue to have the academic science kind of be a feature of this conference, maybe framing it in that space would be a more productive way of integrating academics into what is being billed as a technology conference. So that's a good comment. Monthly ? Polar technology webinars. I don't think I could commit to that, but somebody said 1.5 hours slot quarterly with 2 presentations.
Yeah, you're all going to recognize my handwriting. Yeah, I would really like to see a webinar series take off, and I'm kind of prepared to put my money where my mouth is and organize it. Ideally, if we can have the technical support from Arcus, that would be great. But otherwise, just doing it through a webinar platform. And yeah, Nancy's suggestion, which was this to do two related presentations back to back in the same session, I think would be great. And I think because it's the message that seems to have come out from the discussion is that actually polar technology is a very broad community, and even broader than we've had represented, because we haven't had the research station facilities people really mentioned, apart from Dick Armstrong Armitage, who was here earlier in the week. And the IT, there's a whole spectrum. So actually, you probably could organize a monthly webinar because it's so broad. It just needs the organizational effort to make it work. But yeah, I'm certainly willing to give it a go, and I'd like it to continue because there are so many people who can't attend a meeting like this and would benefit from it. So yeah, if anyone wants to join me, come and talk to me afterwards.
So for I don't know how many years now, IRIS has been trying to do within the whole IRIS facility quarterly calls on technology, and we do them a little bit, and then they taper off or whatnot, and that's the wider IRIS bit. So, but it's pretty much been the Polar Group and TA, and so I think if we get a few of these groups, but also realize that almost all of these science technology groups could tack on and be part of that as well, that I think it wouldn't take too many groups for this to be sustainable.
No, thanks. Yeah, so maybe the next couple months we can start kind of organizing, and once we kind of get to a space where we have a bunch of people, we can start sorting that out and kind of assess who's willing to put in the time. I think that's probably number one. And then what the collaborations portal is, how useful we find it and how functional it is for us as a group. And then just kind of engage with everybody's busy schedules and see how far we can take it. So here's one I actually really liked: include a lightning session for half-baked ideas projects that are on the horizon. I like that one a lot. And I think that could be a really fun session for folks, because I think that's what gets us excited about science. It's like, hey, I have this thing I've been working on in my closet. Like, would you look at it? I'm not sure if it's like real or something. Like where things can kind of be, you can kind of throw spaghetti at a wall with a very talented group of people and get a lot of feedback that you might not get otherwise. And again, that kind of reemphasizes the need to have a space where people can bring stuff and have these hands-on sessions. And I agree. I agreed with that.
Combine these two, meaning the webinar and the incomplete ideas part. So someone comes in and says, here's something that I'd like to do, and we'd like to see how many of them are interested, and then maybe 3 months later we do a webinar.
I like that idea. I think that would be a good draft to get folks tuning in. Yeah, so then with that, interested groups can collaborate and coordinate design efforts. Some of those things some of the problems that people mentioned that I think we haven't solved yet is our charge controllers and rime ice prevention. And then for future topics, I was the one that actually wrote transportation. I was kind of hoping to pitch it as a session for this one, because we're getting these electric snowmobiles now. We're looking at Arctic trucks for the Greenland ice sheet as a way to traverse in a safer, more efficient manner. Pat Haggerty has been talking about helium, Zeppelins, Zeppelin transports as one day replacing all of our flight ops, just because they can carry such a huge payload. I mean, and these are kind of like the things that I think about as being part of the logistics program. And so I think in the future, I'd like to see a bunch of that. Again, research station facilities management is again something that we run into all the time. Is how to keep stations sustained in such challenging and changing environments. And I think there's a lot of knowledge out there that we didn't really tap into with this conference. Hack Weeks, I think that's something that NASA is really good at, as well as open science topics that maybe NSF is kind of a little bit behind on in terms of adopting for their communities. I think Piper was really big on partnering with tech startups and or launch Alaska for Polar Startup Weekend. I think this is a really good idea, because I think we are drawing a lot of people who aren't necessarily from academic communities and so can't come to really NSF for funding, but we need their solutions to eventually get to a space where we can use them in our research and our facilities management in the future. So making that relationship a little bit easier, and then maybe cultivating that relationship between the private sector and the Fed world. Oh, and that's kind of everything that was written up to people. And like, these are great and they're wonderful contributions to conversations that will come in a short report that we'll probably write, documenting what happened today or these last 3 days, and trying to pave the way for future technology conferences, and trying to expand the community that we're reaching, and making sure it's a event that really serves the community that we're attracting, and that people feel like they're getting value out of it. So I guess, do people have any last comments kind of before we say thank you and farewell?
Yeah, just on that last topic you touched on with the attracting more of the private industry. I had one of those half-baked ideas in the closet you were talking about. So what just hit my mind is like maybe on a one-off thing, or once every couple so years, you could attract some venture capitalists in, and you could have a pitch day and where people would actually, maybe something could, like, walk away with something, because that'd be up to the VC guys. But in terms of how they're rated or scored, the audience basically is going to be who would be particularly the beneficiaries, the consumers. I mean, so like I said, this is really half baked, but maybe there's some things that could be done with that.
Yeah, and that's maybe something you and I can do on the NSF side. I really want to cultivate a better relationship with those seed money guys, because that's also something that I think could be pitched as working, across foundation stuff. And I'm not sure what their limitations are, and maybe that would be in terms of like who they can give money to. And so, but yeah, that could be a place we could start with that. Oh yeah, no, raw dough, definitely not half baked, but no, it's good. Oh, I think yours is better than. I think it's better than. It's more further along than half baked, but and then I think Mike, you had.
Yeah, I was going to say, I presume the vague intention was that this would happen again in 2 years' time, but we need to persuade NSF of the need to fund that.
Yeah, I think we need to. I need to have clear conversations on, the funding model. I think that's the intention. I don't. Yeah.
Okay, so entirely unbiased sample here. Show of hands who would like to see the conference happen again.
Noted. I'll take a
Okay.
picture.
Slightly better show of hands. Who knows someone, and that someone can be yourself, that would like to be on the organizing committee for the next conference?
Pretty. Oh, great.
So
Great.
hey, try and nab
Notice I'm not raising my hand.
nab the volunteers while you can. But seriously, if you have ideas about people who you think would be good to have, perspectives that we don't currently have, because I'm very aware that the conference reflects the knowledge and biases and interests of the organizing committee as they stood. And this was a first go at booting up the organizers. And so we can, we can get a more representative sample if we have a more representative conference if we have a more representative committee.
I think that's a really, really important point. I think we tried to pull. When we were pulling this together, we did look back at the lists and targeted people who had been before, but also kind of integrating a whole new batch of people who didn't know what the Polar Technology Conference was. So if we will take all of this feedback now, but having kind of a stake in these conversations and participating while you're offline. I know we're all busy. We're all very, very busy. I think we accept that. But this is the feedback that we're going to need kind of as we're planning stuff down the road. Okay. Well, you can find me. So I'm just KRUCK at nsf.gov. It's I'm a contractor, but that's my NSF email. It's my main email. So if you have something that you don't want to say here in this forum or in public, just shoot me an email and we'll digest it. We'll be reaching out to you all with, I think, surveys and more information and requests to participate in the years to come, and to tell all your friends about this so that we kind of have a deep pool of knowledge to pull from as we move forward. And I can't thank you enough. I know this was all touch and go, and I'm so pleased with how it all turned out. And I've been so pleased with all of you as participants. It's been really nice to see all the work come to something that has felt really productive for me. And I hope it's been productive for you as well. So thanks, everybody.